Have you ever had an experience that suggested someone else was in your house and just thought, I don't want to know, and left it? Sometimes the fear of the unknown just seems to be the preferable option than facing a real concentrate danger. Normally it's nothing though. One time the beeper function of my wireless house phone went off when I was the only one at home. It could only be called from the living room. Another time, I swear someone took some change from my desk. They're probably just slightly disconcerting tricks of money. But what would you do if something truly suggestive happens? Would you run or just ignore it? Like I did? Last Monday was a normal day. I got up, brushed my teeth, changed into my school clothes. A little parts of my morning ritual. It seemed like it would be just another totally worthy day until I saw the strings. There were 3 or 4 thick twines of string in my room. They were crisscrossed between the walls and around my bed, one attached to the door. No way I could have missed them before. I should have tripped over them. They were tied to pins on the wall, which had also non-existent before 10 seconds ago. Nobody could have been in my room while I was in it, let alone set this up. It was early, and my brain wasn't processing correctly. Simply, I just discredited the site, untied the strings, and left for school, leaving them balled up on my desk. It didn't get any better later. Outside my house, there were bundles and thousands of them, tied between houses, around cars, and across the street. This had to be some sort of super elaborate prank. One of those hidden camera shows or comedy improv blogs. They had gotten everyone else to play along too. Passers were tangled in them, tying them to objects that they were walking towards them and away from, as if they had been, and where they were continuing to follow the laid out for them. I nervously continued my journey to school. On the bus, everyone except me was tied to the door. As at school, the group of friends were tied to each other. Teachers were tied to their desks and boards. Oddly enough, at this point, I could all wonder why I had been out. When my friend Lucy sat beside me in first period, she would simply plonk her bag down on my lap and rested her chin on her head, looking right at the window past me outside. Hey, Lucy. No response. Come on, I didn't expect you to be on this too. She sighed and started taking her books from her bag. All the books were tied to her hands. I grinned and then yanked one of the strings off of a book. She didn't seem to notice, instead simply disregarding the book completely, letting it drop to the floor without a moment's hesitation. I laid down, picked up her book, and placed it back on her desk, and then she took no notice. Well, if that's how we're going to play it, I smiled. I'm trying to look playful, but just trying to hide my nervousness. I bundled around the strings attached to her together with one hand, then pulled them all free. She blinked and turned to stare at me. Holy crap, Martin. You're like a ninja or something? I've been sitting here for maybe at least 10 minutes. I smiled again, relieved to find my friend had finally noticed me. Where did all those strings come from? She gasped, seemingly to notice them for the first time. I assume you were all messing with me. She stood up and backed into a corner. No one else in the class noticed. They weren't here just a minute ago? Do you see them too? Her tone made it clear that she was genuinely scared. No, didn't you? I was interrupted by my teacher slamming the door behind her. Everyone except me and Lucy murmured a good morning, and no one else seemed to pay attention to either of us notice. People have been ignoring me all day, I said to Lucy, before turning to our teacher. Hey, dumb bitch, you can't teach for shit. No reaction. I'm getting away from all this shit. Lucy pulled a few strings aside and left the class. I followed, and surprise, no one else noticed. We wandered in the corridors, leaving and entering classes as we saw fit, whenever we untied a chair or book from someone else. It was like they seemingly didn't matter to them. It didn't exist. I showed her the streets outside, and there were more strains than I came this morning. Twice as many. We carefully picked our way through the tangle, making our way to the nearby coffee shop. Not particularly grand, but I know what would you do in our situation? I said as I fear of the unknown. Sometimes it seems like the safer option. On a few occasions, I suggested we untie a few more people. Lucy was opposed to it, remembering how terrified she'd been. In the coffee shop, we grabbed a couple of sandwiches and drinks from the fridge. When we found a table, untied all the strings attached to the chairs and sat down. We ate in silence, both of us too scared. Both of us distracting ourselves by watching the strangers in the shop, oblivious to the strings. After about 20 minutes, Lucy spoke up. Now she's going to take that sandwich, she said, pointed at the woman across the shop. Sure enough, she walked over the fridge and took out the plastic wrapped sandwich that she was tied to. She pays for it and then leaves. She did so, according to the prophesies of the strings, what the guy does not intend to pay. I watched as a man took his coffee and ran out of the store, as the two servers were just looking too exasperated to go after him. This is horrible, she whimpered. Let's go, please. Outside wasn't much better. Everyone just followed the strings instructions, going about their daily lives. Lucy announced that she was going to go home and to sleep this off. I agreed with her to walk her home. She only lived 10 minutes away. Away from the busier part of town with the fewer strains, it was nicer. We could pretend it wasn't happening. When we turned to Lucy's street, she stopped and her mouth falling open. What now? I broke the silence. My voice sounded surprisingly small. Look! She pointed at one of the outside of the neighbors' houses. I saw it clearly, and I'll take the memory of that moment till the day I die. A little dark imp, maybe about 3 feet tall, walking with his knuckles on the ground, almost like a monkey. It had 2 bubbliest yellow eyes, taking up half of its face, and no mouth or other facial features. It was holding a hammer and a ball of twine, which was letting out behind. It walked quickly and quietly from the front door of the house to the mailbox. It stopped and hammered a nail to the side of the box, tied its string around it, and then turned to face us, and stopped when it spotted us. My bottom fell out even further it already had been, but it had been just stared with a look of surprise and curiosity. You could almost even say it was a more frightened one. Suddenly it beckoned us with its tiny hands. I looked at Lucy. She hadn't moved. I looked back at the imp, which stared at me. I held with the distance between us and then held it again. This wasn't fear of the unknown anymore. It was fear of the little guy. Didn't seem like anything to be scared of. When I was a meter away from it, it extended his hand. Hi. I shook it. It nodded in approval, blinking its massive yellow eyes at me. So, you're the ones in charge of the strings? It nodded eagerly. I called Lucy over, but she stayed where she was. There are more of you? Another nod. I wanted to ask it so many questions. About what it is and where it came from. It seemed like for now it was stuck with only its eyes or yes or no questions. Do we even have the free will? It just looked at me almost sadly. I immediately felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't bear to look at the little monster anymore. I grabbed Lucy, who had been listening to our exchange, and now sat down on the crib with her hand in her hands. Come on. We entered her house, and I made her a cup of tea. When I found her in the living room, she had untied her dog that was curled up. Crying, I set the tea down and sat beside her. I'm so scared, she whispered, after a good 10 minutes of sobbing. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I'm going to sleep, she mumbled suddenly, and it was under within the minute. Sleep was starting to sound pretty good. All of a sudden, my eyelids felt like they were going to be weighed down. I collapsed onto the rug, and the last thing I heard before falling asleep was the scurrying of several sets of little feet nearby. I felt much better the next day, as if the whole affair had been a dream. I probably believe it if it even wasn't woke up by Lucy's mother that morning. Wondered what I was doing sleeping over without permission or something. Over breakfast, Lucy asked me why I looked so pale and nervous. I turned to her and smiled, mumbling something that made her feel sick. But the truth was, I was scared, because I couldn't see my own any strings. So I was wondering whether these actions were truly my own. Well, my pretties, that was String Fury, a Fury pasta written by Tesla. My final thoughts on this story. Well, this is actually a pretty good classic creepypasta that I've been wanting to get to for quite some time. This actually was a pretty good creepypasta that I've seen a lot of people narrate, such as Mr. Creepypasta, Creepypasta, Let's Read. There's a lot of people that actually narrated this story, and had theories on the string theory. I mean, the fact that the strings, appear and then the protagonist was following after or something. I mean, I have a feeling that this was a dream or some hallucination that the protagonist was going through, which could explain, why everything happened the way it did. But this story, man, I really have to say is a pretty damn awesome story, especially with the concept and everything of its own self. I really do find this story to be quite good. If I gotta be brutally honest, I honestly do find, the great concept of it all, and I really gotta say it's pretty good. So, I guess that being the case and that being said, I do find this story to be quite amazing, well done, and it's a pretty interesting stories. So, I could definitely say this one is pretty good for what it is. So, I guess with that being the case, that being said, I really like this story. It's, you know, a really good classic one. And this is actually one of the reasons why I'm kind of, trying to stick to regular pastas instead of, cliched ones all the time. Because I'm going to be honest, cliched ones are just kind of, you know, garbage nowadays. But, I mean, there are some decent ones, some decent stories that are good. But, that's just what I'm seeing personally. But like I said, that's just what I think. But the grammar was honestly really well done, as well as the sentence structuring. I honestly gotta say, the author did a great job with this story, and I definitely commend the author for it. So, with that being the case, that being said, let me say this right now. Um, I do have to say, like, whatever these little monster guys with big eyes or something, like, if they had something to do with the strings, what were these creatures? Were they like goblins or something? I mean, it doesn't really explain much about it, but I have a feeling there were some sort of weird goblins or something. That's just what I'm thinking. That's what it is. I mean, that's just what I think personally. I mean, I'm not really entirely sure. Maybe the author can, maybe if the author were to find this story, maybe they could explain more in the comments below. But like I said, can't really say, what monsters they actually were, but they were definitely something. So, I guess with that being the case, that being said, this story was a pretty good one. It's definitely a good story. It's well made. It's definitely worth your time if you want to read a good pasta. This one, I actually have to say, it was pretty good. So, with that being the case, and with that being said, I'm going to sit here and say this now. This is just simply my own personal opinion. And if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. This gets a full out of 10. It's a well-made story. Definitely well made. Concept's good, and it's a really good classic creepypasta. And I mean, I'm very impressed that this story is pretty recognizable because a lot of narrators have narrated this story. I mean, I've seen a couple of videos about it. Like, I mean, I've seen, a lot of narrators touch this story and they said it was pretty good. So, with that being the case, that being said, I'm going to sit here and just say, what did you guys think about this story? Did you enjoy it? Did you not? Also, what you have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. If you're new to my channel, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload. And as always, I'll be catching you all in the next video. And as always, I'll be seeing you all next time. If you're new, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload, because I upload every single day. And if you're new to my channel, like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. I do apologize if I'm repeating myself, but that's a trait in me that gets really hard in times. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this video. And as always, I'll be seeing you next video, and roll the outro because I'm out.